Hello, everybody. My name is E-Train. Welcome to the E-Train Talks podcast. Have you ever listened to an audiobook and wondered who exactly is reading this novel and how did they manage to get such an interesting job? Well, you might just be listening to the voice of Mark Sanderlin. Mark has narrated countless books, including Linked by Gordon Corman, Best Nerds Forever by James Patterson, and the Baby Zeke series, as well as many others. I personally think that being an audiobook narrator would be the best job ever. I'd be able to get paid for doing two of my favorite things, reading and talking. But enough about me. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark Sanderlin. Mark, welcome to E-Train Talks.
Thanks so much, E-Train. It's so great to talk to you today.
Great to talk to you too. I've been so excited to talk to you.
Awesome.
I put some questions together that my listeners would be interested in learning about. I even added a question posted by one of my Twitter followers. So my first question, it might be obvious, but I'm so curious. Why did you decide to become an audiobook narrator?
Sure. So I was a child actor back in the day. I did some movies and commercials, nothing too spectacular that anybody would know about now. But I also did some voiceover work when I was a kid. So I've been doing this for a really long time. Not audiobooks, but just voiceover work in general. I took about 10 years off to pursue a music career, which I still do some of. But I came back around to voiceover work, especially during the pandemic. It's like the perfect work from home job. I mean, you can see me here in my padded room in my living room. I've also always been a huge book fan. So it was really the perfect combination of skills that I had at my disposal and work that I was really excited to do. And like you, two of my favorite things are reading and talking. So it was kind of the perfect move.
I'm so glad that you found a job that you enjoy.
Yeah, for sure.
I probably mentioned that I think a career as a book narrator would be amazing because it is. But what talents are needed to be a narrator?
Sure. So first, before you even get to the voice acting part and the recording parts, you have to be a great reader. And being able to take in the words on the page and really understand and digest the author's intention and understanding why a character is saying something or how they would say it based on what's in the book. That's the biggest thing. Most everything else as an audiobook narrator can be learned. So a voice that's nice to listen to is a big plus, but it's really about the reading. And even the thing about having just a great voice. There are totally some voices out there that I know who do audiobooks where you'd go, maybe that's not what we'd call a super pleasing radio announcer voice, but it might be the perfect voice for that particular book or that particular character. On the sort of talent/skills side, having a lot of range in your voice helps to be able to kind of, work with pitch, with timbre, with color in your voice. It means you have so much more at your disposal when you're creating the different character voices. But again, on the other hand, there are narrators I know who might not be able to go super high and do little high pitched voices or go super low like me. I don't have a super low voice. But they know how to bring the characters to life just with the way that they speak or with the attitude that the character has. And that kind of comes back to being a really good reader and being able to absorb all that. I even know there's some narrators who work a lot with physicality in the booth. They'll even a little eyebrow quirk or whatever when they're doing a character will just give it enough of an attitude to sort of differentiate. This stuff is more skills based and you can learn all of that. And I've had some really great teachers and coaches that I've worked with to kind of hone that for audiobooks. If you're recording at home, like I do a lot of, you also need to know how to use all of the equipment. So the mic placement and the recording software and vocal techniques. So you're not sounding like a croaky frog after recording for 8 hours a day. But that's all really skills based stuff. I also think that being a super organized person is really helpful. And again, that's something you can kind of learn, but some people are just really super organized because you have to do all of the technical sides of the recording stuff, when you're self-engineering, but then you're also meeting the deadlines with publishers. You're, scheduling the books. You're prepping one book while you might be recording a different book that same week. So organization is a really big helpful skill.
Well, you certainly have a great voice. I've listened to some of your audiobook recordings, and I really love like how you have such a wide vocal range, and you narrate some of my favorite books by some of my favorite authors.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So, do you have to audition to book a gig as an audiobook narrator?
It depends. When I was first starting out, I had to audition a lot because the publishers and authors that are hiring audiobook narrators, they aren't necessarily familiar with you and your work and your voice. So they have to make sure that you can, do the job. And when I started out, I was auditioning a ton on some of the casting websites, working with a lot of independent authors. But once you've been at it for a while, like I have, there are some casting directors and publishers who will, when they get a book that comes in and they know you, they'll go, "Oh, this would be perfect for Mark." And then they'll send me an email and they'll say, "Hey, are you interested in doing this book? This is the synopsis." Sometimes they'll send me the actual manuscript. And if I'm interested, then can I fit it in my schedule in this amount of time? There are still some books that I have to audition for. And this happens at, you might be the most famous audiobook narrator in the world, and you still have to audition for some stuff. Because a lot of times when authors have their books picked up by publishers, part of the negotiating process, and one of the things that they can negotiate is that they get to approve whoever does the audiobook for their book. So there are some where the casting directors will talk to 4 or 5 different actors that they think, might fit for the book, and they'll have us audition, and then the author gets to pick.
That's great. And it's an added perk that you've done so many audiobooks now by so many notable authors that a lot of publishers, they now know you. I know my fellow book lovers really want to know, what is your favorite book that you've narrated so far and why?
So usually it's whatever book I'm working on at the time because I get so absorbed in the story. But you already mentioned, I think, one of my favorites, and I was so excited that you mentioned this one. Best Nerds Forever by James Patterson and Chris Grabenstein is such a cool book. It's a great middle grade book. It's about a boy who dies in a biking accident and then becomes a ghost who has to try to solve the mystery of his own death. It sounds super dark, but it's actually really funny and very moving. It was just, when that book landed in my lap, I was like, this is the perfect book for me. I love it. It was also really exciting to do a James Patterson book, who's such a famous author, especially working in a lot of middle grade and YA. When I go home and tell, I'm an adult. So when I talk to like my friends and family about like what I'm doing in audiobook world, they're like, "Who's that? Haven't heard of that author," but James Patterson, they know. So that was exciting to do those books. And I've done a couple of his now. So it's really cool to work with that. Also, I've done a couple of Chris Grabenstein's books before, and I just love his writing. He's so funny. This is really exciting, I also just recorded a new Goosebumps book, which is so cool because I grew up reading Goosebumps books. And that one comes out in June. And when that one came through, I was like, yes, I've made it. There's another great one I did with Chris Grabenstein called Stuck. And it's an Audible original, but we got to do it with a big multicast. So there were probably 10, 15 people. And this is pre-pandemic. We got to record it all in the same room at the Audible studios, which was really cool because it felt like, oh, I'm really doing it and I'm not just doing it by myself. But it's got all the like sound effects and things in it. And I think Chris even does some characters in it, which is kind of cool. So we got to work with the author on set.
That sounds so fun.
Yeah.
So, another reason being a book narrator would be fun is because of all the different voices used to tell stories. How many different kinds of voices have you used while narrating stories?
Oh man, so many. I actually have one of the Minecraft series that you mentioned. I did the Baby Zeke books, and then I'm doing Winston the Wandering Trader is another book series I've done for that same author. And I think we're on like book 15 or 16 of that series. So when I'm doing an audiobook, I'm the kind of narrator where I have to keep a voice file for every single character that I can, just in case I have to go back and listen. That author in particular, Dr. Block, he loves to pull back a character that we saw like from book 2, who now like shows back up in book 15. So I keep voice files for every single character that I do, just in case I have to come back to them sometimes years later in a series. And I think we just hit 300 different characters that I've done for that book series. And not all of those are like completely unique, but I have to make sure that I'm consistent if the listener is listening all the way through the series, you never want somebody to go, hey, wait a minute, that person sounded completely different the last time we heard them. So yeah, I think 300 is the most that I've done for a series so far.
Well, this is kind of an added question.
Yeah.
Do you play Minecraft? Like, because you're reading the Baby Zeke books and the Wandering Trader.
I've played a little bit of Minecraft. I'm more of a Zelda Breath of the Wild person myself, but I have played a little bit of Minecraft. Mostly just as like research at this point for the books, because sometimes I'm like, what is this like what does this monster look like? I have to figure out what the character voice is for whatever that is. So I played a little bit, yeah.
What was the toughest voice or accent you had to learn, and how did you go about learning it?
So as far as the toughest voice, early on have you listened to the Baby Zeke books, or do you know them, the plots?
Yeah, I know by Dr. Block. I've listened to it, yeah.
Okay. So there's a character in there named Otis, who's a zombie pigman. And when I was first starting out, I didn't quite have a good grasp on like how sustainable these voices need to be. So I gave him a voice that was kind of like this, and not thinking like this is going to be 10, 15, 20 books of this, which was fine for a couple of books. But then eventually I was like, wow, this is really hard on my voice, and I have to take a lot of breaks when I'm doing those books. And then Otis got his own spin-off series where he was the main character. So I was like, no, I can't do a whole book like that. And it would be really hard to listen to if I was like talking like this for a whole audiobook. Nobody would want to listen to that. But luckily, Dr. Block and I found a way to make all of the narrative parts, like his internal thoughts, were like really smooth. But then he talked like this. So it actually kind of worked for the character. As far as accents go, I work with a couple really awesome dialect coaches. That's kind of one of the fun things about being an audiobook narrator is you're always learning new things, because books kind of go in all sorts of different directions. So I've had to do classes in Australian accents, British. I was doing some Russian recently, which was super fun. I think I did a French one as well, but yeah, so it's really cool because, once you're out of college, out of school, you're not really doing a lot of like taking classes in things. And it's a great opportunity to really dive into something new to learn.
Well, I listened to your Russian accents on your website, and I was like, wow, you can do all these different accents. It must strain your voice.
No, it's super fun. And with the dialects, it really helps you get into the characters. If somebody's got like a really strong accent, it really is like, oh, I'm transformed into this person just based on their accent. It's super fun.
So do you record at home or do you have to record at the studio?
I do both. So I live in New York City, which is great because a lot of the recording studios are right here in the city. I love going to the recording studio because there's someone else who deals with all the like technical aspects, and I just get to do my job and I just get to record. But I also have a great home studio here that I bought and installed during the pandemic. So it means for most projects, I can work when I want. I wear my pajamas to the office a lot. But it also means that then I'm in charge of making sure the audio sounds good, the mic's in the right place. I have to start and stop the recording software when I make a mistake and go back and all that kind of stuff. And it can get a little lonely working at home by yourself all the time. It's just me and the microphone sitting in a box reading a book to myself a lot of the time. So it's fun now that a lot of the studios are opening back up because you get to go and actually have coworkers and meet really cool people.
So here's a question I often ask my guests. Was there someone who inspired you to work in the book industry? A teacher, a parent, an author, or a role model?
Oh, man. So I would say, teacher-wise, I was on the speech and debate team when I was in high school. Like I said, I was a child actor, but I did really well on the speech team. And my coach there was the one who really honed in on this kind of work, on taking, the events that I competed in really were like dramatic readings from a book. So I would say my speech coach, Courtney Walsh, back in Oregon, was one of the people that really inspired me to do this kind of work. Audiobooks specifically, the first time I really encountered audiobooks was the Percy Jackson series. I'd been checking the books out one by one from the library, and I loved them. And I was a little older, so I wasn't kind of out of the Percy Jackson age range, but I'd heard about them, so I was really excited. So I read them really quickly. But it was right after the last book came out, and you couldn't get it from the library because the waiting list was so long. And I really wanted to read it. So instead, I saw that Audible was running a special where you get, a free audiobook if you sign up for a subscription. So I signed up and used the free credit so that I could listen to the last audiobook in the series. And that was like mind blowing for me. It really inspired me and now I do a lot of kids books in middle grade and YA. I love the way that I think it was Jesse Bernstein who did the audiobooks for that, but the way he does all the voices for the gods and the creatures and everything, I was like, wow, this is really cool. That was the first time that I was really inspired of like, oh, audiobooks could be a cool way to go.
Shout out to Rick Riordan, the author of the Percy Jackson series, and shout out to Courtney Walsh.
Yeah. Awesome.
So what's your favorite genre of books to narrate?
Obviously I love YA and middle grade. I think it suits my voice better than like gritty cop thrillers or like murder mysteries or whatever. I think it would sound kind of strange, although I love those too. But I think I really love doing YA and middle grade. I also love when I get to do something sci-fi or fantasy, because then you get to really flex the sort of character building muscles when you're doing like wizards or robots rather than just, normal humans. So I love doing stuff that kind of has a little bit of an outside of reality element, sci-fi fantasy stuff.
So I'm not sure if my listeners know this. Well, you might now after listening to Mark Sanderlin, but Mark is also a voice actor. How do you incorporate your voice acting skills into your career as a book narrator?
So they both come back to the same thing that I was talking about earlier. It's reading the text and really understanding the intention behind it. So if I'm doing like a voice acting, doing a commercial spot, my job is to read the commercial copy and understand and then convey what the company is trying to sell or what the ad is trying to get across to whoever it's going out to. You got to get all the subtext in there. If it's something like animation, it's finding different ways to read lines that might not be immediately present in the script, finding different subtext, different ways to make the characters pop. And that all comes into play in audiobooks. And you're doing it over the course of a 10, 20-hour book sometimes. So it's like all of that just longer and bigger, and you're the only one doing it. So there's no visual, there's no other actors a lot of the time. So you really end up using all of those technical skills, the voice technique, and all the creativity that you bring to like voice acting. It's all there in audiobooks too.
Well, now it's time for the question I ask all my guests. If you could be any character in any book, who would you be and why?
Oh man, that is a very good question. I think I would like to go to Hogwarts, but I would not want to be Harry Potter because of all the bad things that seem to happen to Harry Potter. So I think I would like to be unnamed Hogwarts student who just goes about their business and gets to learn cool magic stuff, but doesn't have to deal with any of the other things. Just a random Hogwarts student who gets to hang out and learn magic.
Well, I mean, what's crazy is that the first person I interviewed, they also chose a person from Harry Potter. What they chose Hermione Granger. I mean, it still would be really fun to just be in the background and just learn magic. I mean, it's way better than almost dying every single movie and every single book.
That was my thought, I mean, just like eating the good food in the Great Hall, going to classes, playing on the Quidditch team, not having any like crazy adventures.
So that is a great answer. I would definitely agree. My guest today has been Mark Sanderlin, an audiobook narrator and voice actor. Remember, if you're listening to an audiobook or hear an interesting voice, you might just be listening to Mark Sanderlin. Mark, thanks for taking time out of your day to be interviewed.
Thanks so much, E-Train. That's been so much fun.
And to all of you listening, keep reading, and I'll see you in the next one.